academia, and whatever questions you may have with the hiring process, the application process, interviewing process, we didn't really touch on much. So maybe during this panel, we can talk about that a bit. But first up, we have Dr. Ryan Barnes. Dr. Barnes received his PhD in 2017 from Penn State College of Medicine in Dr. Christian Eckert's lab, where he studied DNA polymerases and DNA replication stress. As a postdoctoral fellow, he joined Dr. Patty Opresco's lab in fall of 2017 and worked to characterize a new system of inducing telomere-specific DNA-based damage. He recently published a first author manuscript in Nature Structural and Molecular Biology on how oxidative base damage at telomeres induces premature and senescence in the absence of telomere shortening. His work has been funded by an F32 from NIA and a K99R00 from NIEHS. He is currently on the job market for an assistant professor position. We have Sarah Deemer, Dr. Sarah Deemer. Dr. Deemer earned her PhD in exercise physiology from Texas Women's University and subsequently completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Birmingham, Alabama. She is now an assistant professor at the University of North Texas. Her overarching research goals are focused on understanding the role of exercise and/or nutrition on how weight loss and weight loss maintenance and the reduction of metabolic disease risk. Mechanistically, her lab aims to examine the role of white adipose tissue and adipose tissue remodeling and function as a mediating factor in the development of metabolic disease. Her goal as an independent investigator is to reduce the obesity and diabetic burden in women, especially in minority and aging populations from both an applied and mechanistic standpoint. We have Dr. Efra Rivera-Serrano. Dr. Rivera-Serrano was born and raised in Ponce, a small town in the south coast of Puerto Rico. He attended the Pontifical Catholic University of Puerto Rico, where he earned his bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry, and then relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina for his graduate studies, and obtained a master's degree in plant cell biology and later a PhD in comparative biomedical sciences from NC State University. He completed 2 postdoctoral research experiences, one at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and one at the University of California, Davis, studying cell biology and immunology of viral infections through advanced microscopy techniques. He then worked for 1 year at UNC Chapel Hill as a research associate before taking a break from the bench and switched careers to become a science communicator shortly after the COVID pandemic. He then decided to return to the academic setting as a lecturer of biology and is currently a non-tenure track assistant professor of biology at Elon University, a small, predominantly undergraduate institution in North Carolina, where he teaches courses in cell biology, human physiology, microbiology, and others. He is currently applying for a tenure track position in primarily undergraduate institutions, where he wishes to open a research group in virology and science communication. And then finally, we have Dr. Christy Towers. Dr. Towers earned a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Colorado, Denver, Anschutz Medical Campus. She transitioned to a position as a postdoctoral fellow there in the Department of Pharmacology. Her work has been funded by numerous grants, including, among others, an F32 and a K99R00 from NCI. She is currently an assistant professor at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California. The Towers Lab studies cellular recycling processes in cancer cells and are interested in specific mechanisms autophagy-dependent cancer cells can employ to maintain organelles homeostasis and generate nutrients when autophagy is blocked. In particular, asking how cancer cells can avoid the buildup of damaged proteins or mitochondria, 2 molecules autophagy is necessary for the clearance of when autophagy is inactivated. The goal of their work is to identify compensatory mechanisms of autophagy-mediated degradation in order to design better targeted therapies to decrease tumor relapse and increase cancer patient survival. All right, so Doctors Tower and there you all are. I think I can move you around. Let's see. There we go. Wonderful. So what I'd like to ask you all to do just briefly is to introduce yourselves. You can share a little bit about your position, maybe what your day-to-day looks like, and we'll kick off the panel that way, and then move into some question and answer period. So Dr. Barnes, do you want to go ahead and start for us?
Sure, that's fine. Yes, as mentioned, y'all can hear me, right?
We can.
All right. As mentioned, my name is Ryan Barnes. I'm a postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm in, I guess now my 6th year of a postdoc, but I'm on the job market now. I've been interviewing at a few places, including the KUMC. So yeah, I'm kind of still at the beginning of this transition process. I've just finished 1 year of the K99 phase of my K99R00. So my day-to-day has changed a lot in the past few months compared to the beginning of the year, between traveling for interviews and things like that. I feel like I am very behind on the bench compared to what I'm used to, but it's a very exciting time. It's a lot of work and learning how to present yourself and share your science with different groups of people, but it's exciting. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about this process from my perspective and go from there.
Dr. Towers, would you like to go next for us?
Sure. So my name is Christy Towers. I am an assistant professor at the Salk Institute. I started my lab in 2021, so mid-pandemic, which is fun. And yeah, so my lab's been open about a little over a year now. And we study cancer cell metabolism. And yeah, I also had a K99 and interviewed also during the pandemic, which was also fun. But yeah, so happy to chat about anything and everything about K99, about transitioning, about interviewing. I also interviewed at many different places that are very different, right? Meaning lots of teaching versus no teaching, soft money versus hard money, meaning you have to pay off of grants to cover your salary or the institute covers your salary, large places, small places. So happy to chat about that and how you make decisions. Also, I have 2 small kids, and so happy to chat about how that works, although it's still a work in progress by far. So yeah, I'm an open book, and yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deemer.
Hello, everybody. So I am coming to you from a dark gym. Our power literally went out like 10 minutes ago, and it's out on like half of campus, and we're doing final exams right now. So this is really fun. So if you can hear the beeping in the background, I'm sorry, that's something that's going off. So I started at the University of North Texas in fall of 2020, and was interviewing for jobs in spring of 2020. So I took a job here at the University of North Texas without visiting the campus. Everything had to be done via Zoom. I don't recommend it. I think it's very important that you actually get a chance to visit the campus and see how people interact and the day-to-day life on a campus. So this is, my breakdown is 50% research, 40% teaching, and then 10% service. So due to COVID restrictions and things, this is my first semester after starting in fall of 2020 that I've actually had an opportunity to really start spending some time in the lab and get my research up and going. So I teach 2 classes. Our full load for us is 2, so 2 classes each fall and 2 classes each spring, which is quite a bit. And it takes a lot of time away from being productive for research. Now, the benefit is I'm not on a soft money. I do have, consistent salary, which is nice that I can then add to with grants that I get. But yeah, so happy to chat. Coming from a little bit more of like the teaching institution side of a research. It is an R1 institution. But yeah, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Dr. Rivera-Serrano.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so you all heard my introduction. Probably the thing that I would say that stands out the most about me is I've been through a lot, jumping. So my resume is all over the place. I started in plants, moved to viruses, left the bench after 2 postdocs, even though we can chat about that. I was one of those that did a PhD and postdocs, knowing that having my lab in our institution was never my goal. I really just wanted to teach. And so to me, it's all about there's a time for everything. And so for me, like when I first applied to teaching positions, I will say 2018 or like early 19, well before COVID. But unfortunately, my training had been all research. I have a very strong publication record, but there was nothing about teaching. So it was really hard for me to find positions in just full teaching small colleges. And so I decided to, okay, like, this is not working out. I'm just going to continue in the bench for a little while. And so I did that for about a year, and then COVID happened. And to me, as for many of us, COVID sort of was a catalyst. Just being at home for so long forced me to like revalue and rethink my goals. And so I decided to, after we returned from that March lockdown that lasted like 6 months during COVID, I lasted like a week or 2, and I just couldn't handle like that meetings online or Zoom. And so I decided to put my notice there, and just that was the end of my research until like now. And so I switched to science communications just to work remotely and just support my family from home. So I work from home for about a year and a half. I am the person, I still have those positions. So until like 2 weeks ago, I have 4 jobs going on at the exact same time. Don't recommend it, it's wild, but I'm glad that I did, because I am the one behind a lot of Twitter pages. Like if you follow Molecular Biology the Cell or Genetic Society of America on Twitter, like I'm the one behind those scenes that tweets all that. I am the one who crafts and highlights articles for, so if you were to publish in Genetics or G3, I'm the one who reads the article and crafts a tweet to put it online. So that's still to this day what I do, mainly on the weekends. But then I got tired of being at home for so long. And so I decided to just go back. I didn't want to be pipetting left and right. And so I decided to just go back and teach a class or 2 as an adjunct. So I work as an adjunct for at Elon, where I'm still at, for a semester, and then they offer me a full load. And so I am now applying to the same institution to have my own lab because I just had a position in microbiology. Again, until last week or so, I've been teaching 5 classes per semester. It is a lot, plus keeping 2 jobs on the weekends, 2.5. And so if you have any questions about jumping from here to there, depending on your environment, I'm the person to answer those questions, because I've been there and I know the struggle. However, the one thing that I'll say to me also, you can ask me, is the one thing that I have refused to do is to move. I love my family. I love where I live. And so to me, staying in that environment that you like is my priority. I love where I live, and I'm not moving my family every 3 months just for a position. So that is a strong belief that I have. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. It's interesting to hear everyone's different perspectives and what made the decision for them in terms of the career position that they have right now. And that is something that is routinely required in academia, is this idea of having to move or being expected to move regularly. And perhaps Dr. Towers, you can also speak to this with having children and moving an entire family unit and all of that. And so if your priority, as Dr. Rivera-Serrano said, is that, nope, I'm staying here, how does that then shift these career trajectories, or does it? So thank you for those introductions. If you guys wanted to add more on that topic, please feel free. But in that, oh yeah, go ahead, Dr. Towers.
Yeah, I will chime in on that a little bit because I do think it's extremely important to think about your life outside of science, because I do think there's this sort of mentality of like, oh, you know, we're in it for the love of the science and that's all that matters. And things like money or cost of living or being close to family, like those things should come second. That's like totally not true. And you will never, I think, never be happy in the lab or in the classroom if you are not happy outside of lab or the classroom. So you should always prioritize those things that matter to you. And for me, I also had to make those decisions of what matters to me the most. And so for me, when my kids were really young, so I had kids as a graduate student. And so going into my postdoc, my kids were very young and I did not want them to be away from their grandparents. And in my culture, it's really not a thing for people to leave their families, right? Grandparents raise the kids, and that's how I grew up, and that's how I wanted my kids to grow up also. And so I refused to move going from my graduate to postdoc. And I was like told to my face that that was like career suicide. How could you dare stay in the same institution? Those were like hurtful comments, but to be honest, I do think some of it was true, and I had to go out of my way. Like I remember in grant applications going out of my way, I was told to like say exactly why I stayed, like say the ages of your kids, like go through all this detail of my personal decisions, which is ridiculous. And so, you know, now that I'm in maybe a little bit higher of a position where I can be on these study sections and reading these grants, I am working to change that because I think it's absolutely ridiculous. But I do think it is important to get diverse experiences in your training. And so you can do that by not moving across the country. You can do that by maybe changing the topic of your research or reaching out to mentors that have diverse techniques or technologies and bringing all of that in. And I think, you know, the original idea of why you should move institutions was to just get a diverse training. So do that staying wherever you want to stay. Or if you want to move to a certain place because that's where family is or fun things are or things that bring you joy, then do that and just be on purpose about where you're going and why you're doing those things. And lastly, I will say when I did decide to move, and I did move my whole family, I was really upfront about what I came with as a package when I was negotiating and letting people know what matters to me. That is 100% up to you. A lot of people choose not to reveal personal decisions when they're on the job market for fear of being biased against. And I think that that's legit as well. But I will just say what I personally did was I was really honest. I did say, I have 2 small kids, schools matter to me. That is gonna factor into the decisions that I make. The flight difference or distance that my parents will have to travel to visit makes a difference. Like I was really upfront about that. And I think in the long run, it helped me negotiate for the things that I needed. For example, being able to afford a house in an area with good schools. Like I was really honest about that. So yeah, I'll just add that little tidbit.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay, then I would like to direct, we have a couple of questions in the chat that are very similar in that we have Layla asking, what are the platforms or places you can find job ads that you can apply to? What do you recommend if you're on the job market and looking for a position in academia aside from LinkedIn? And I believe that was the next question as well. If you can talk about how you identified academic positions to apply for and how you decided which ones of those were a good fit. So if you all wouldn't mind talking about those topics a bit, I'd appreciate it. Dr. Barnes, go ahead.
Sure. I've actually never used LinkedIn. People made fun of me for that, but Twitter, Nature, Nature Careers and Science Careers. Those are the three platforms that I identified the vast majority of the applications I put in. Nature Careers was really nice, had a really intuitive interface, and almost every job that was on Science Careers was on Nature Careers. So I typically stuck with that one, and you could sort by location, how new the ads were, things like that. So like after I did like my first like big search, then I would just like check every week or so and just hit newest, like what's new. And then Twitter and, I mean, obviously who knows if Twitter will even exist next week, but there was a lot of good, science Twitter is great. People tend to share positions that are in their universities or things they become aware of. It's a great resource. And then, talking to people, I mean, we're encouraged a lot as trainees to network as much as we can and find people at different institutions that one day we could be like, hey, I'm on the job market. Do you know of anything that's going on? And or even like after you've applied somewhere, like, hey, just letting you know I applied to this place or this position in your department. Just wanted to put my name in your head, hope good things. I know it feels to a lot of us like cringe, like we don't want to ask for things, but the biggest thing you can learn, at least in academic science, is you have to be your own advocate. In addition to advocating for people around you, you have to advocate for yourself and push your career and your motivations forward. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Could I just ask, is there a season for jobs in academia, or is it year round? How does that work?
There is a season. That was something I did not learn until like last year, because in my head I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait for my paper to be accepted and then I'll look for ads. And like ads existed, but this was like maybe March or April of this year, and I put things out and I'm like, no one's saying anything. Why? And it's like, oh, because the academic cycle's already done. They just don't take down their ads because they don't want to have to necessarily renew them every year and whatnot. Because you'll see open dates for like maybe the year you're in, and then close dates 2 years later, and that's because they don't want to have to redo it. That was something I didn't learn until I was in it. So it really picks up ads like end of July, August. You tend to see a lot of dates or closing dates be end of September, end of October, but it really trickles. And I don't know if that's because of COVID. There are ads that are still coming out in the past like month or so, with deadlines still like into like early next year, but it does tend to follow an academic calendar. So just keep that in mind.
Dr. Rivera-Serrano, I was wondering if that is any different for adjunct teaching positions, or is it the same schedule?
Yeah, it's about similar to me. I'll be bluntly honest. Every position that I've had is because of either networking. So just like it was mentioned, like I've never used LinkedIn probably since like my second year of grad school. So it's been like 10, 12 years, 15, I don't know, the last time that I was on LinkedIn. I was super active on Twitter all the way until the pandemic. When you're a virologist and there's a pandemic going on and you just get exhausted. So that was, I tapped out. But I would say every position that I've had to this point came to me from networking. I think maybe one time that I actually went on to, Indeed and started like sending applications. So I've been very fortunate when it comes to that, and just like people just remember you from, so again, it sounds very cliche and people are like, oh yeah, networking, but like it really matters. Like even the first adjunct, like I had a friend like, hey, this university is looking for a lecturer in biology, and because maternity leave, and so stuff happened. Someone had to go on maternity leave. They needed a spot to fill in, and so I immediately just like jump in. And people, especially going to Dr. Towers mentioned, like there's a lot of pros and cons when it comes to moving. When it comes to staying in, I've been here for like 15 years. Everybody knows me, and regardless of the institution. So all I have to see is like my name, and they're like, yep, Efra will do it. And so seasons, yes, when it comes to position, but again, a lot of them have been just simply just reaching my inbox from science communication. And even though I still do it, even though it sounds very umbrella term, imagine me just sitting here and then someone emails me, hey, I'm publishing an article and I need you to proofread it, or I need you to edit it. That's $300, $500. Like, it adds up. I don't have a website anymore. I don't even promote what I do. It just gets in my inbox just because of word of mouth. So don't underestimate, you know, your presence and your quality of job, because again, we all have a lot of skills, and people just reach out. If you're really good at what you do, they'll find you, and they know that you do good work. And so to me, what I mentioned when it comes to adjunct is that, again, fortunately for me, it was like that. But a lot of them, or this position, when it comes to adjuncts, what I've seen is, so I'm in North Carolina, and so we have here NC State, we have UNC Chapel Hill, we have Duke, and then a lot of small colleges around. And so what usually happens is that the department heads of those small colleges just send email requests to the department heads of those departments, because they know that we're here. If you're adjunct, usually those are not going to be posted, because someone in California is not going to relocate here for a 1-year contract, right? And so usually what they'll do is just send it to the department head. Hey, we're looking for an adjunct, usually like upper tier postdoc or recent graduate, whatever. Can you like promote in your department? And so some really good department heads do spread the word, some don't. And so I will say, just make sure, if that's something that you're interested in, to network with your department head, because they get all those emails, and sometimes like they're so busy that they trash them. But that's usually your best bet when if you really want to get experience in like teaching as an adjunct first, just 1 class or 2 classes a semester. Usually your department head is going to be the one that gets all those announcements. When it comes to science communication, and again, I mentioned that because when I was an adjunct, the pros, yes, an easy load, and it balanced it out. The cons, we have summer and winter break. You don't get paid. And so to me, I balance my income with science communication from home. Those much easier to find going to straight societies. So I'm a cell biologist, microbiologist. So I just go to ASM and ASCB website. What do you have to offer, like, as a part-time gig from home? And so you'll be surprised by all the stuff that they do have. And I'm saying that for even if you have your own lab right now and you're listening, chiming in, like, some of your trainees want this experience. Help them when it comes to that, because society is like just imagine every time you go to a meeting, genetics meeting, cancer meeting, there is a newsletter that was prepared. You get emails with publication digest. You follow them on social media. You read their newsletter. Someone out there with a PhD is doing all that. And there's a lot of demand for that. And so don't underestimate your scientific societies are not just for meetings in the summer. They have job boards, and they themselves are always looking for jobs. So that's the last thing that I'll mention when it comes to that.
That's awesome advice. Thank you so much. Dr. Deemer, did you want to share about how you were able to find positions to apply for and how you decided on what was worth your time?
Yeah, sure. So when I started looking for jobs, I was coming from a nutrition department where I was doing my postdoctoral work. So I was looking in both nutrition and sort of exercise physiology areas, since that's what I'd done my PhD in. Things I have learned also as being a member, I've been on a search committee, I think almost every semester. I've been at UNT now, so I have, some insight from that side as well. But as it turns out, it's very difficult for a department to hire you if your degree is not from a department. So my PhD was in exercise physiology from a kinesiology department. So it became very difficult for me to actually get a job in a nutrition department, despite having a lot of background in nutrition and a lot of coursework in nutrition and stuff. So that's something I think to just kind of keep in mind when you're looking for jobs too, is that matters. When I was looking for jobs, I wasn't really active on Twitter yet. I didn't really become active on Twitter until like during COVID, just to try and, increase my network, because we were no longer traveling to conferences and stuff. So I used mostly higher ed jobs and Chronicle of Higher Education to look, for what was posted. And again, I agree with there's a time frame for that. There are some jobs that just kind of seem to always really be open or always posted, but there's definitely a lot more jobs posted during the fall because they're trying to get people hired to start like the following fall for that next academic year. So that's mostly where I looked, was those places.
Thank you. Dr. Towers, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, I'll just really highlight what's already been said about networking. Every single interview and job that I got was from networking. It was not from, and these are academic, for to start my lab. Every single interview was from networking. And that networking, yes, you absolutely need to advocate for yourself, but you also need to have mentors and PIs that are going to advocate for you. So the chair from my PhD, my postdoc mentor and my PhD mentor sent emails out saying, Christy's going on the job market. And from all of those, that's where I got all of my interviews. Also, a part of that is people need to know who you are. And so going to meetings every year, multiple meetings in your field and meeting people. I think a big mistake is people go to these meetings, they give their poster, and then they just like sit with their lab for the rest of the meeting. To me, that is a waste of a meeting. You are there to meet people. I know it can be scary, but really try to venture out, go sit at random tables, introduce yourself. If you're gonna go to a seminar and see somebody speak, ask a question. Raise your hand, ask a question, go up to them afterwards, introduce yourself, ask a question. That goes a really long way and people will remember you. And so I think that coupled with then when people reach out and say, oh, this person's going on the job market, remember you met them at this meeting or whatnot. I think that's huge. Also, yeah, LinkedIn in academia is just not a thing. I think that's really important if you're trying to go into industry. I think it's really important in that context, but academics, for whatever reason, have really gone to Twitter, and science Twitter is amazing. If you are not on it, I really encourage you to get on it, and let's just hope it continues to exist. But for all its flaws, I really think it's a fantastic way to network. It's a fantastic way to build your brand. Let people know who you are scientifically and beyond science. Like what kind of communicator are you? What kind of scientist are you? What kind of mentor are you going to be? Like all of those things really matter, and they matter once you start your lab too. It's a huge way to recruit people. Yes, and then also about the timing. I think it's moving earlier and earlier. And so, it used to be ads would post in August, September, and now it's really, moving up into the summer. So I think be prepared and try to be some of those first applicants applying to things and get those first interview slots. I think if you wait till the fall, it's too late. So I really think June, July is when you should be applying for at least for R1 institutions.
I have two follow-up questions, and then we'll get to the question we have in the chat. Dr. Towers, did you ask your mentors to send out that email for you, or was that something that is offered? How do you go about getting your mentors to advocate on your behalf?
Yes, absolutely. I asked that. I said I'm going on the job market. Would love if you could help me sort of network in that way. I also think when you are selecting your mentors, right? If you are grad students that are going to apply for postdocs, this is like the number one thing you should care about, is that your mentor will advocate for you when the time comes. No matter what position you want to go into, academic, industry, government, whatever, you need somebody that will advocate for you. And if you've already made your choice and you're like, shoot, I didn't pick a PI that's going to help me with that, then just find PIs that will, right? There are you can have unofficial mentors that will help you do this sort of thing. But just ask, right? It's an email for them. It's really not, it's not a lot of work for them. You could offer to draft the email even. But yes, I asked and then they did it.
Awesome. Thank you. I wouldn't have known to ask for that. So that's a great piece of advice. I'm curious, how much time should you think about dedicating to this job search and the interview process? Is that then your full-time job that you have to do on top of your current job? And how did you go about navigating all of that?
I would,
Sorry, go ahead.
okay. I would say absolutely. I spent so much time, when I was really, truly, like really seriously looking for jobs, researching each of the institutions that, I will say I didn't apply to everything that had a job posting in my area. I looked for places that I wanted to live or that I knew people at, or, again, going back to that networking idea, but, spent a lot of time researching, the department, what are the values of the university, what are the values of the department, hand not submitting the same cover letter to every place that I apply to. I changed it, to fit, again, the values and the mission statements of each department I was applying to and or position, things like that. It was a lot of time. And then also, kind of having to really check the things, see what else has been posted, that sort of thing. I remember my office mate at the time, she was on the job market as well. And I think we kind of likened it to sort of like dating apps. So you just have to kind of keep checking and keep putting your heart out there to hoping that somebody else will go, oh, you know what, we're interested. We'd like to schedule, an initial interview with you or something like that.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that it really is a lot of work. You have it's way more effort than applying to undergrad or grad, because a lot of the places, in addition to like making sure the cover letter is different for each place, a lot of places have similar but yet different requirements. So like some universities want a 2-page research statement, some want a 3, some want a 4. So you have to have all of these different things ready. Most of them now want, thankfully, teaching and diversity statements, but some of them want a combined teaching and diversity statement. So you just need to be ready for all these different things. And if you're going to apply to like 30 places, it really takes a lot of time. So yeah, don't feel bad if you end up, getting behind on some of your other commitments, because it's ultimately your future and you have to take it seriously.
I also think it is a ton of time. I agree. I also think that's why it's important to talk to your mentors about if you really are ready. So you don't want to waste time if you're not ready. And so I think, be humble enough to ask, do you think I would be competitive? I think also a lot of people sort of test the waters and maybe put out just a few applications one year to places like you would go to. But I think a big mistake is spending all this effort when you're really not ready, right? Like maybe your paper is not close to being submitted, or it's not on bioRxiv, for example. In that case, I would say you might not be ready. Or you like just got your K99 and you've got to have 2 years in that K portion, like you might not be ready. So don't waste your time doing it this year. Because it just takes a ton of effort and time. So just make sure you're ready. Ask people, to look at your CV and ask them if they think you're ready.
I want to mention a couple of things here. And one is, of course, it's been discussed here, like all the assets that we have, right? So we're all highly qualified, don't doubt your skills. And because of that, like also try to put yourself in a position, it takes a lot of time. You don't want to waste a lot of your time either. And so things like knowing just because you see a university with an open position right there, and perhaps it's a place where you see yourself living, doesn't mean that you have to apply. AKA, to me, it's like, look at the department. Ultimately, think about the department that you're in. Everyone is different. They all have a different expertise. They all come from a different background. You're not going to have 2 labs studying the exact same thing. So don't waste your time applying for a position studying, in my case, like viruses in the heart, if they already have someone already doing just that. Don't take it personal. Just, if you have time, do it, of course. But, just be smart with your time. And also try to, if every institution is different. And so locally we have internet, right? So you can start seeing like their younger faculty. when did they join in? And you can sort of like see just based on the picture, like who's more recent. What were their qualifications when they got the position? How many articles do they have? Is that institution only hiring, their new hires are all those with nature and science and cell papers, or are they more diverse? That will immediately from the get-go just give you an idea of, we all have our qualifications, but again, for me, it's like, I don't want to waste my time if I see that their last 3 hires were all cell nature science papers, and then perhaps I only have like PNAS. It's not to mean that you cannot apply, because we all qualify at this point. Balance yourself out, because you don't want to spend weeks in just one application when your chances perhaps are slimmer than in another, simply because unfortunately there's a lot of luck and randomness involved in academia, as I'm pretty sure you're all are familiar with. Some experiments work out and you have a great paper, some are not. And so that's the luck, unfortunately, that sometimes we take very personal into a university doesn't want me, that didn't accept me, but there's a lot of complications here. The term diversity here, I'm going to take it away from what we're normally associated with diversity. You also have to bring that diversity to the department. And so ensuring that you're a good fit as well. It's not only about them and do they fit you, but do you actually fit in their own bubble? So keep those things in mind.
Thank you. Speaking of diversity, since we've had several people bring it up, and we have a question in the chat that says, in most of the academic positions, they ask for a 1-page diversity inclusion statement. In brief, what is this statement for, and what should we include in the statement?
I can comment on this sort of being on the other side now, as I think Sarah also, right, and I mean, all of us, I guess, are, now participating in hiring. I think this statement, you really want to take the time to be personal and talk about your personal experiences and what does diversity mean to you. We do not want to see there is a problem with diversity in academia. Like, we do not want to see like a broad statement of what we all already know is a problem, hence why we're asking you for diversity statements. We want to hear about your personal experience. For some of us, that's easier said than done, right? For those of us that are from diverse backgrounds, it may be easy to talk about that. But for those of us that are not, right, that maybe are the majority in science or in your field, then talk about how you have promoted others, why you think it's important to maintain a diverse lab once you are the one making those hiring decisions. How are you going to eliminate your own implicit biases? Those sorts of things are what we're looking for. And again, just really try to dive deep and make it personal.
Yeah, I remember.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope, you first.
Okay. I remember struggling with the diversity statement from the standpoint of, well, I'm still a trainee. Like, I haven't been in a position where I had an impact on someone else's career and whatnot. But you really have to find, like what Christy said, like the things that happened to you, whether like anecdotal things that happened, or one of my mentors pointed out to me, she said, oh, well, you co-organized a Gordon research seminar. I'm like, yeah. So you picked people from the abstract. I'm like, yeah. Well, then you made sure that like you had a diversity of people that spoke at your seminar. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, then that's an example of something you can put. I'm like, oh, I didn't really think about that, because it just seems like an obvious thing to do. And I wasn't necessarily being deliberate, but, as maybe not every experience you have is obvious, but really search for things like that. Times when you were putting groups together, even if it was just for like a local like seminar series or something like that. Times where, diversity, you had some control over it and you were thoughtful, or at least ultimately, you were doing things correctly. But yeah, I think it is difficult for some people to write about them because we haven't had experience, but there are way more examples on the internet now of good diversity statements and like just like topics, what people are looking for. So yeah, definitely don't think it's something that you shouldn't give time and attention to, because a good institution, but one that you want to work at, is actually going to take it seriously.
Dr. Deemer, did you want to add to that? Great, thank you.
Sure. I mean, not too much really, because it's been pretty they've covered it well. What I would say too is that, like one of the things that we ask our candidates when we interview them, and what I really, kind of pushed for with our interviews that we've been doing, is that we actually give the candidates that we're going to do like a Zoom interview, we give them the questions we're going to ask them in advance, so they have an opportunity to think about and prepare, answers for questions. And, I really like that, because I'm not trying to trip somebody up, in an interview. I just want to know who they are and would they be a good fit. So one of the things, that I think that we talk about a lot is that University of North Texas is a minority serving institution. It's a Hispanic serving institution, and so in addition to what you're doing in the lab, what are you doing in the classroom to make sure that you are including, first generation students, or how do you deal with students that have jobs outside of class, and when they contact you and say, I've got a job, I have a family, my kid is sick, I can't make it, I can't do this exam, like it's really a lot about, it's less about the textbook answers for the need for diversity, and more about like really what kind of empathy are you providing, and what are you doing as a person. I'm gonna use this word sort of, I'm not a fan of it, but as a person, sort of empower to help bring others up in a sense. So yeah, I think the more open and honest you can be in your diversity statement, the better.
Dr. Rivera-Serrano, did you want to add anything?
No, I think as mentioned, I
Okay.
think it has been covered well. I would say if you're struggling with just how to get started, again, all the negative things of COVID aside, is that there's a lot of webinars out there for you. All you have to do is search for how do I prompts for a either teaching statement or whatever. There's plenty right now, because everything was done via Zoom a couple of years ago. And so everything is open access and free to you. Again, sometimes it's not the writing part, is starting. And so sometimes just watching the 20 minutes of a webinar, you don't have to watch the whole thing, it's enough to spark that little neuron that you needed to get it started. So again, you use your resources. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Plenty of examples out there that, again, you don't want to copy, but just to spark your brain.
Thank you. So one topic we have, unless there's a question in the audience, one topic we haven't covered too much yet is the interview process. So I'm wondering if you have any advice or suggestions, or that one question that you think is the most important now as the perspective of having gone through interviews and also being on some of these hiring committees. We have about a little over 10 minutes left to discuss that. Thank you.
My biggest piece of advice is to be excited. We are looking for people that are excited about what is about to happen in their lab. How are they going to change the field of science, right? So just be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, choose a different topic, right? Think of something that you are passionate about to pursue. And it doesn't have to be oh, I'm going to cure cancer, or I'm going to fix all of these diseases. It can just be a passion for the fundamental biology, right? But just be passionate. The people that are up there that are just slowly going through their science and what they're going to do, those people, I think really rub us the wrong way. And then the other thing I think is important is to think about the specific department, the institution that you are interviewing at. They are going to be very different. So some institutions want somebody that is going to absolutely has to get R01s. So make sure that you are pitching your science in a way that suggests that you will be competitive at R01s because you have to bring in grants. Other institutions, like for me at the Salk, we really want people that are going to change their field, right? So we are not looking for smaller chunks like an R01 would be, right? We are looking for like, what is your 10-year plan? And so we want you to think as broad and as big as you can. Other institutions don't want to see that, right? They want to see an R01. They want to see the preliminary data that are going to go into this. The other big piece of advice I have is like practice your chalk talks. Honestly, the chalk talk is where most people mess it all up. Like they give these amazing seminars, and likely because they've been giving seminars their whole career, right? And they've practiced it over and over again through lab meetings and all of these things. But it seems like most people haven't practiced their chalk talks very often. So practice, run through it by yourself with nobody listening, and then get as many people as possible to be there while you do a chalk talk. And all of those practices should not be with people from your lab. They should not know your science, because we will not know your science, right? So find random postdocs in other departments that have no idea what you work on. Find other PIs that have no idea what your science even is, right? So if you're a cancer biologist, go find the cardiology people to listen to it, right? Because those are oftentimes going to be the people that are in your chalk talks. You know, and you don't have to go so far out, like don't find physicists if you're a cell biologist, but, you know, just really try to practice getting the questions that people that don't know what you're talking about are going to ask you. And yeah, biggest advice, just practice over and over again, especially the chalk talk.
Dr. Towers, we didn't have anyone talk specifically about chalk talks. So could you just briefly explain that for everyone? Like, how is that different from a seminar then?
Yeah, so a chalk talk usually is going to take place after your seminar. So you'll give a 1-hour seminar that's on your science, very traditional, all the things that you've done. And then your chalk talk is going to be you and a whiteboard and like 3 different colored markers. And you'll probably be given like 5 minutes or so to draw a couple of things on the board. But then after that, it'll be you and like 5 to 10 faculty sitting there, and you will be pitching what you plan to do. And again, it depends on the institution. You might want to go through like your first set of grants. What are the aims that you're planning to go through? What are the big questions you want to address? How are you going to get grants to fund that? Who are going to be the people that are going to run those projects? And I can guarantee you that you will get through maybe the first 20 seconds before somebody asks you a question. And from then on, it will just be back and forth questions and conversation. What we are looking for in a chalk talk is, yes, big ideas, what are your projects, but also, will you be a good colleague? Will you be interesting to converse with? Will you be good to collaborate with? Will you be fun to ask questions about our own science, right? So it's about, how do you respond? How do you get to the point where you say, I don't know, right? You will get to the point where you will not know the answer. So how do you say, I don't know? And hint, the correct answer to say, I don't know, this is the correct answer. When someone says, you say, oh, that's a fantastic idea. I hadn't really thought of that, but I would love to collaborate with you if you're an expert on that topic, right? That's how you say, I don't know. But so finding ways to like build in collaborations and things like that. But yeah, they can be tough because you don't know what questions you're going to ask. To prepare for them, you want to know who's going to be in there. You always will know ahead of time who will be at your chalk talk. Look them up, because they will ask questions based off of their science. What are they experts in, right? So if they do lots of mouse modeling and you do no mouse modeling, you've never thought about doing mouse modeling, it makes no sense in your project, I guarantee you're going to get a question of like, well, how could you do this in a mouse, right? So just think about it, right? And you could have an answer that's like, oh, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about doing it in a mouse model. Would love to collaborate with you on that, right? So you don't have to have a perfect answer. You just have to know how to answer those questions. And you know, Ryan's on the job market right now. I'm sure he can touch base too and tell us about some of his chalk talk experiences.
Yeah, so I'd say just like everything, there's diversity in the chalk talk. So the first one I did, it was actually like a combo research and chalk talk. It was an hour and a half. I didn't know necessarily who was going to be in it aside from the chair, and I'd put together maybe like 45, 50 slides. I think I barely got through 30 of them before the hour and a half elapsed. But as Christy was saying, really the most important part is the discussion. Like if it's just like an academic, like a regular research talk, you know, if you don't have any questions, that's a sign that maybe it wasn't great. If the people in the room aren't asking you questions, aren't engaging with you, that's a problem. Overall, for interviews, I would say you want to be yourself. You want to be the best version of yourself. But a lot of these faculty members, what they're looking for, as Christy mentioned, are colleagues. They obviously they want someone who's doing the best research or has the best or the most likelihood for success. But they also, they don't want to work with someone who's going to be an asshole or just like siloed and not collaborate or be helpful on student committees and things like that. It's all about like being a good scientific citizen, and you want to relay that. And I also agree about the enthusiasm. If you're not excited about your science, why should anyone else be? So these are all things that you've probably like picked up between grad school and your postdoc, but like it's really now you have a day, 2 days to showcase that. And I know sometimes thinking of, when we do interviews, we get so worried that we can't ask a question. And like, what does that mean? If I can't think of a question, am I not interested? And like, no, sometimes it just means you're tired, because doing 10 one-on-one interviews, a seminar, lunch with students, and dinner, it's a lot. But the one question I think you can ask of absolutely anyone, and it works, that I'll give it away for free, is what brought you here? Or if someone is more experienced, like has been there a couple of decades, what's kept you here? Because again, you're putting the emphasis back on them, and people love to talk about themselves. So that's really a good way to navigate an interview. You can't, if you're really, at the end of the day, your coffee's worn off and you just want to sit there and nod along. Like that's a way to pivot the focus a bit off of you, and they'll come away feeling good because they talked about themselves for 10 minutes.
Wonderful. Dr. Rivera-Serrano, would you like to add anything about interviewing?
What I'll mention, I guess, for those who are perhaps interested in like a half teaching, is for me, it's less shop talk, it's more teaching demos. And so, which again, reiterate, just like shop talk, these are not seminars. You might be an excellent person at giving research seminars, but are you good in the classroom? And so to me, when I'm applying to PUIs, is really, okay, they'll call you, but they don't care about your high quality papers. Is show me in an hour with a real classroom right here that you can engage students. And so that's a very different sort of like approach to what we're trained to do. We just sit here, talk for 15 minutes, slides, and praise my data, and then questions. And so breaking that notion of this is not about me or my research, I don't have to sell anything here anymore. It's all about engaging students and can they understand. And so to me, it's like preparing for those teaching demos. And it might sound like easy. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just practice my teaching, but every classroom is different. So this is where understanding your audience. So like to me, when I do like teaching demos in physiology, I had to like learn from the institution who takes physiology. And then I discovered 75% are nursing students. So my way of teaching has to be adapted to, hey, 75% are nursing students. Why should they care about physiology? How do I design my activities? Should be about like things that they will apply, like measuring blood pressure. What does it mean? And so again, knowing your audience and again, breaking that notion. Unfortunately, we have all been trained for years to just give research talks, very monotone, very you-centric. And whether it's a chalk talk, if you really want to go into full academia, or a teaching demo for an hour with a real classroom, is no longer about you. And so remind yourself that every single second, that am I, and what Ryan mentioned is right here. Am I getting a lot of nodding, or am I seeing them hesitant to like raise their hand? Because that's what you want, regardless of where you want to be.
That's great. Dr. Deemer, did you want to add anything?
Sure, I have power. So I would say a lot of the schools, a lot of the places I interviewed at were, sort of on the lower tier of the R1 category. We didn't do any chalk talks. In fact, it was, you've got to do a research talk and you have to teach a class, because again, a lot of these universities, especially the newer R1 institutions, are have been teaching institutions in the past, and they still expect the faculty to be able to teach and be in the classroom and stuff. So you kind of have to prepare both of those things, and it's a lot. It is a really exhausting process, but again, you have to show your enthusiasm of why, you want to be there. They also have to show you their enthusiasm of why they would want you there. And don't be afraid. Sometimes we can avoid asking important questions because we don't want to upset somebody, but I think that you have to also, get a good feel for the environment, because if you take the time and the effort to move to a place and a year or two down the road, you're already looking for another job, like that's a lot of resources wasted, and that's a lot of time wasted for your productivity in the future, because you're going to move somewhere else and you have to, every time you move, it's like starting over again. And so that's just also preventing your, progress up the tenure totem pole.
Thank you all so much. We are at time, so I'll just allow, if you would like to say anything in closing, I'll let everybody have an opportunity to do that. Okay, and if not, that's great. Thank you all so much. If you all will please thank our wonderful panelists for their time.
I'll say
I learned
one more thing.
Oh yeah, please.
Just, for any of you, whether you're a doctoral student looking for a postdoc position or you're a postdoc looking for a faculty position, I just want you to know that it is totally okay to reach out to me at any time, either on Twitter or through email. And I'm happy to chat through like my experience on a more one-on-one type of basis where you can have like specific questions. It's hard, we're talking to a large audience, but, please feel free to reach out at any time with any questions you may have.
I second that. I'm also available. And I also would recommend that you all do that to anybody that you see in a position that's the position you want. I think very few people are going to be like, no, I'm going to ignore somebody that's like wants this career. I think all of us want to, are excited about the careers we chose and want to bring more new trainees into these careers. So anybody you ever see that's doing something you want to do, hit them up on Twitter. If they're local, say, hey, can I take you for a cup of coffee? Again, most people aren't going to turn down coffee. Maybe they choose tea, but most people won't turn it down, right? So this is part of networking. So I'm here to reach out. Happy to set up separate one-on-one Zooms always.
Fully agree. I'll third that. If you have any specific questions for someone who's just going through the process and trying to navigate it as best they can, please reach out. I know my Twitter was there at the beginning. I don't know if my email was, but feel free, whoever was organizing this, Rebecca, I think, share my email. Happy to answer any question that I can.
And I think the last thing that I'll mention is acknowledge that this will take a lot of time, and it's almost impossible for you to like sit down one day and get it all done. So I think what I'll end up with is take advantage of when you're feeling inspired. And today I'm passionate about like teaching. I'm ready to take that teaching statement. So like, don't think, I think that what my point at the end is like, sometimes it's not the right day to write something or to, sit down, I'm going to get all my statement done. And then you take it on yourself. Well, maybe it's because I don't want the position anymore. So don't think it like that. Sometimes you're just not ready that day. And so give yourself plenty of time, more so in the writing, just so that to allow time for when you're ready. Not being ready right now to sit down doesn't mean that you don't want it. Just same way that perhaps at 5 in the morning, you're not ready to go to the gym, but maybe at 6 p.m. you are. And so don't give yourself credit there, but also, listen to your body and take your time there.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll end on that note. Listen to your body and do what's best for you. We are about to take a lunch break. Thank you again to all our panelists, and we will be back at 1:30 Central Standard Time. Thank you again.
Lunches are in the kitchen. There's salad, so unfortunately they changed the salad. There's cheese on it, so